We're back. It's the Horns Up Talking Texas podcast. Fisher to Soplis. We took a little break, but we're back, guys. We were in Vegas for the Super Bowl. We're doing a lot of NFL coverage. We are here to do college basketball for however long we have left in the season. Hopefully, we make a beautiful run like we did last year, but not, unfortunately, counting our chickens on that one. We're here to talk the official 12-team playoffs. It's in. Sark's extended. And baseball's underway. We're not going to do too much baseball coverage today, but you can look forward to that coming up because we have a good baseball team as per usual. So we'll do a little baseball coverage throughout the season. Let's start with the big news. 12-team playoff. It's official. Run everybody through, because you ran me through it the other day, how exactly the seeding can be broken up for next season come, December.
I'll do my best here.
You did good. You did good the other day.
So 12-team playoff, it's a 5-7 split. So what that means is that the five highest ranked conference champions, regardless of what conference they're a part of, automatically get admission as one of those 12 spots. The 4 highest ranked conference champions get the 1 through 4 seeds, which will have the bye in the first round. So that's basically the best way of explaining it. And then that 5th conference champion, who is the highest ranked team, will be guaranteed a seed between 5 and 12, but not always the 5 seed. That depends on the ranking of the seeds, of the teams between the 5 and 12 seeds by the CFP committee. So, it could end up being a hypothetical could be, if Texas wins the SEC, they're guaranteed a 1 through 4 seed and a bye, right? That's what we'll really be talking about on our show. But presumably, you and I went through a couple of the scenarios and what seemed, like likely outcomes on the charity stripe, our brother pod, sister pod, whatever you want to call it, with Horns Up. So go check that out. You can listen to that on all the different audio platforms. And of course, there's a charity stripe YouTube as well, where you can watch our lovely faces as you do with the Horns Up show.
Great plug.
Thank you. But it seems, and what we kind of came to terms with, Josh, was that you're likely going to get 4 or 5 teams from the SEC every year, 3 or 4 teams from the Big Ten, maybe 2 teams from the Big 12, 2 teams from the ACC, and then, that 5th conference champ, whoever that ends up being, whether it's, the WAC or the Mountain West or the Atlantic Coastal Conference, there's a variety of other different conferences and some teams like Liberty, who was
American's a big one.
Yeah. Liberty was a good school last year. Tulane has been good, the last couple of years. SMU. Yeah. There's a couple of schools that are going to be competing. And then interestingly, as we discussed on the charity stripe, Notre Dame, any team or any college that's an independent, it doesn't matter. Like, if they're not a part of a conference, they can't be one of those top 4 seeds. So the best seed that Notre Dame can be, and they project to be a fringe playoff, a CFP team. The highest seed they could be is the 5th overall. So what we really need to focus on is, the SEC and our competition in the SEC. And if we win the SEC, which is going to be a tall task, obviously, but not out of reach, I don't think, just by nature of how talented the Texas Longhorns football team is going into this upcoming season. We secure ourselves with a bye, and that's what we'll really be gunning for. So yeah, anything else you wanted to add, Josh, just on the...
Yeah, I mean, the obvious gut check reaction, I was just, pulling up our schedule as you were going over all that and valiantly. And I just had it. Oh my God. Here we go. Too many tabs open. Just looking at our schedule, everyone knows we've all gone through, but just to hit it home versus Colorado State, not the easiest of tune-up games, to be honest. At Michigan, home versus UTSA, home versus ULM. And our first SEC game ever will be home versus Mississippi State. We go to the Cotton Bowl for OU. Home versus the Dogs, who are probably the favorite in all of college football, at Vanderbilt, which you think is not an SEC team, but they are at least considered an SEC team. We have home versus the Gators. We're at Arkansas in a rivalry game where we have to exact revenge from a couple years back. Home versus Kentucky, at A&M. Arkansas trap game. Georgia obviously incredibly tough. At Michigan, they're the defending champs, even though we all think they'll take a step back. Yeah. So basically what what I'm getting at here, the way our schedule breaks down, the way that we have seen other SEC schedules. If we are not in the 12-team playoff with this SEC schedule, it is a complete disaster with the guys that we have returned and the positions that they're returned. We've lost skill players. We've, you know, I think we all thought when we in the transfer portal thought filled their holes nicely. But pause. I get it. Whatever. But you know what I'm saying. Fill those spaces nicely. But we return our quarterback. We return our running backs. We are all highly on. Other than Brooks, but he was out already, so we grew accustomed to it. We returned 4 of our 5 starting offensive linemen. For the best 4, no offense to Christian Jones, who honestly is I'm hoping could work his way into a 3rd, 4th round pick. We return a lot of good edge rushers. Our defensive backfield is strong. Linebackers should be pretty solid. We have a really good team, and quite frankly, as far as SEC schedules go, we have a really easy SEC schedule. We just plain and simple do. We don't see Alabama. We don't see LSU. We don't see Ole Miss. We don't see Tennessee. We don't see Missouri. We don't see, and I think those are, those would be the tougher teams.
Well,
Other than, of course, Georgia, who's the toughest, but we have that at home at least. And I'd rather 10 times out of 10, 11 times out of 10 be at DKR, of course, versus the Dogs and test our luck there. And that's no shake on a Kentucky team who's been strong in the past. No shake on Arkansas, who'll be competitive. And last time we went there, we lost. And of course, A&M, who I think should be revamped with Elko, especially defensively. But Florida's not what they used to be. Mississippi State's kind of going through it a little bit for sure. Mike Leach passing a year and a half ago, 2 years ago at this point, maybe, or by the time season starts, it'll be 2 years. Horrible passing. So they're still, I think, in recovery mode. This is a really, really easy schedule for Sark to come in on. Like, as far as like the name brands, these teams have never been more beatable in my eyes, other than Georgia.
I
we
think
don't have to go against those big. We don't if we had like a Tennessee in there, like at Tennessee, I'd be like, okay, like this is not a cakewalk.
Right. And I also think, with how much turnover the Michigan team has, getting them early in the season is better than getting them late, I would say, in my opinion. And with A&M and Florida, who I'll just mention both of those teams from a roster creation standpoint, have some talented football players on their teams. But if it's that both those games are late in the season, and that, at Kyle Field, the Texas A&M will show up for that game, but what will the Aggies be playing for, right? And later in the season, what will the Gators be playing for when they play Texas? And, with these college guys, one little thing on the mental side can throw a game in a different direction. And so, trusting Sark and the rest of the staff to keep the guys focused and maintain that focus throughout the season, like they did this past year. They never lost sight of things, right? And they were always prepared. And during games, they were dealt adversity, but they always, for the most part, overcame, except in that game against Oklahoma and Dallas. But again, that was really just Dylan Gabriel made incredible plays at the end to win that game for them. And then against Washington, Michael Penix had the best game of the season and of his football career thus far, college, high school. And, so those aren't excuses, but they're all that to say, like, I never felt like we were underprepared going into games. Right.
No.
And so I think, continuing with that continuity on our roster, I'd expect for those guys next year, game in, game out, week in, week out, to be prepared. And I think it's worth mentioning that news as of today that Chris Gilbert will be returning as a special assistant to Steve Sarkisian. He was he tried his hand at a tight ends coach and assistant head coach for the North Texas Mean Green, but he was a guy that Sark had brought in when Sark first got the job on the 40 acres. He was instrumental in supporting the recruiting in the Arlington area and the DFW Metroplex of guys like Cam Williams, Jonte Cook, Anthony Hill, Malik Muhammad. So it's great for those guys for for Coach Gilbert to be back with the squad. And I certainly think that his support will be much needed next year alongside Sark and the rest of the coaching staff.
100%. And it's again, you want all the right guys in the mix, and I think it's exciting for him to come back and be a part of something special. And again, just to hit home the schedule and how imperative it is for us to really take care of business this year. Tennessee's got the most similar schedule to us, but instead of they have their schedules. I guess they matched it up identically. Like you play a lot of the similar teams as someone else, but they see Alabama, and unfortunately we don't. So they see Alabama and Georgia. Georgia sees Ole Miss and Alabama and Tennessee and Auburn. We don't see Auburn as well. So it's one of those things that we're sitting here with, the 12-team playoff, and we're bringing, again, you bring up Gilbert's return, and we've spoken about how many guys we've had in the coaching staff not leave, right, and stay and want to stick around and want to be a part of something special. I just really think that it now more than ever, we have to at least make it to the SEC title game, which will be the top two finishers in SEC standings will play in the SEC title game in Atlanta early December. We have to be there, even if it's like, hey, like the one game we drop is to Georgia, fine. Like it's Georgia. I mean, ideally we run the table on them and maybe see them again, or at least like a win there knocks them out and we drop a game down the line. But this is, I don't know, man. Like I'm just looking at I'm looking at everyone's SEC schedule. Ours is the easiest. And I guess it's a testament to us in some ways because we're a good football team and we should win a lot of these games. Right. Yeah. And that's a compliment to who we are. Like we should be, they're easier games because we're good, not because the teams are so bad. Because you bring up the point of like Florida, and one of the other teams, and A&M, and like the personnel they have on their roster. Like they're still SEC schools, man. Like these are still pros in their team. Like there are guys that are going to be playing on Sundays, Thursdays, and Mondays, and Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, and every day now that the NFL is on. There are guys that are going to be playing in the National Football League in both those rosters, no question. But our team is so good, which is a compliment to them, that a lot of these games are easier. I think we're going to be favored in every game, and like, and on top of that, like we all have 4. It's 4 and 4. So everyone in the SEC has 4 home games, 4 away games.
Right.
One of our away games, kind of not an away game.
You mean our game against Oklahoma? Yeah. But I will say, like, that game, as we well know, can always be a toss-up, no matter what the talent looks like on either sides. And I would say that Oklahoma going into this season, I'd take Oklahoma's team of last year, just if you made me pick right now. But they have some things to prove. Now they have a tough schedule, but I do think, to your point about us making sure we get to the SEC championship in year one, it means that we can lose to Georgia and still get there, right? Because if you talk about the other teams that you mentioned as kind of at the top of this conference, like Alabama plays Georgia, right? They play Georgia and they play LSU. LSU plays Alabama and
Ole Miss and OU.
And they play Ole Miss. Yeah, but I'm not even necessarily I should have more foresight. I'm not necessarily including Oklahoma at the top of the pecking order right now at the SEC. And again, they could turn heads. But right now, if you just had to power rank it before the season started, I wouldn't have them above any of the aforementioned schools: LSU, Ole Miss, Alabama, Georgia, and of course the Texas Longhorns. And then I was just going to mention that Ole Miss plays Georgia, LSU, and you just mentioned Oklahoma. So if you want to throw them in the mix on Ole Miss's schedule, great. But all that to say, we have less chances, and it really, really highlights this Michigan game that we're playing on the road and making sure that we go and take care of business in Ann Arbor because, that is a guy, their head coach was their head coach for multiple weeks out of the season last year. Their quarterback, that's correct. And their quarterback played in the national championship game. Of course, he didn't start because J.J. McCarthy was their starter, but he got valuable minutes in really, really important games. So I know they lose, they lose their running backs. They lose Rome Wilson. Like they lose, of course, guys on the defensive line, but they will be a really, really well put together team that is prepared, that wants to defend their home turf against, what I expect to be going into that game, maybe more of like the nation's darling. Like the media that at large is going to favor us in that game. They're going to think
Yeah.
we're going to go on the road and win in Ann Arbor, because once you get to the mountaintop, like Michigan, and especially when you have kind of that, like that tainted message, that tainted just words and things surrounding your school with the cheating scandal last year and the sign stealing stuff, like everyone wants you to get knocked off, right? So everyone will be rooting for the Texas Longhorns going into that game, not just your three guys plus Quan Cosby on the Horns Up Talking Texas pod. So I just think we can't take that game lightly, and because it's a really, really important game. It really is.
Themselves. It is a huge game. You're right. I love your point of like, maybe because our schedule, we don't have an Ole Miss, Alabama, LSU, Tennessee, Auburn on the schedule, like, to help pump our value up if we do lose to Georgia. Like if we run the table but we lose to Georgia, like, and those other teams, forget maybe having a better record in the SEC, but like they drop a game to Georgia, but then they drop a game on the road to somebody else. It's like really difficult, right?
Look, yeah, if we lose to Georgia, we're undeniable. We're going to the college football playoff.
If we beat Georgia, 100%.
No, I'm saying if we lose to Georgia and we win every other game, we're going to the college football playoff. We are.
Yeah, I agree. I Michigan screwed themselves. They just did, man. Like I screwed them, so they won the national championship. So
they're good for 3 or 4 years. They're chilling.
They're good for a decade, man. Notre Dame is still riding high from '86. Like they're good from a decade.
Yeah, but once you get to a decade, though, I mean, we know we all well know that once even at the back end, those last 3 years in that decade, if things have really taken a sour taste and they've turned for the worse, your fan base, when you're that big, when you're a blue blood like that, like you can't be in that position where you get 10 years away from a national championship and you haven't gotten close again, or you haven't gotten another one. You have to stay at the mountaintop now. I mean,
you have to be at least relevant. If they're like missing the playoffs, well, he's going to lose his job if they're missing the playoffs, because he coached those games and there's a lot of value for Coach Moore, but at the same time, like you can't. At the same time, like he doesn't get necessarily all the credit that Harbaugh. It's not his game plan. It's Harbaugh's game plan. It's Harbaugh's recruiting. It's Harbaugh's system and everything. He has to kind of start a little bit fresh. You can take some stuff from it. He learned under him, great. And I'm not anticipating a huge drop off. I am, from a personnel standpoint. I think a lot of the issues that could have been mended and subsided via the transfer portal, had Harbaugh made his decision in a more timely manner, I think they could be in a lot better shape than they are.
Well, it's also just by nature of how well the team in Columbus did in the portal in comparison to them, right? Their all-time rival, the Buckeyes, had one of the best portals in all of college football,
and one of the best retention rates,
right?
Already
and a top-tier recruiting class coming in with a bunch of really, really talented freshmen.
They killed all 3 personnel phases, 100%. We have to beat Michigan. It's like it's a non-negotiable, because I'm a little worried about how well they'll do this year. So
yeah,
I almost to your point of like strength of schedule. All right, well, we're gonna pop, lock, and drop it from football. And I think we will see you guys. Let's maybe see them this weekend, Tosmer, after the Kansas game. It's a big game. I mean, is there any skinny you want to give in the Horns and basketball team, just to preview or to toss up the?
No, I think anyone who's been following the men's Texas basketball team has likely been frustrated. Although we did have a good win at home against Kansas State on Monday. We only have 5 games left in the regular season, and then we'll have our conference tournament, which we will need to make some noise at. Absolutely. And we need to make noise in these last 5 games. And, we get Kansas on the road. We're in Lawrence, and then we play Texas Tech at Lubbock. And then, we get Oklahoma State at home. That should be a win. But then we go on the road and play Baylor, in Waco before we end the season back home against Oklahoma. So none of those games are easy, and certainly not, the game on Saturday against Kansas. the game against Texas Tech, who you earlier in the week told me you like them, to make a tournament run. And I couldn't dispute that. I mean, they always fare well in the tournament. And so do the Baylor Bears. They're incredibly well coached. Scott Drew is one of the best in college basketball. And of course, we know that Bill Self is as well. So backs up against the wall here for our Texas Longhorns men's basketball team. And, it's put up, you just got to do it. You got to get out there. You got to win some games here, and you have to win.
Is killing me.
You have to win them on the road, and then you have to make a bit of a tournament run, or else we might be in the NIT. And that's just the harsh reality of how good the Big 12 is this year, and how mediocre we have been, and how even in the games that we have won that have been solid victories for ourselves, they haven't sent a message, right? And
no.
There's still been a lot of inconsistencies, and you would expect that for a roster that is abundant with transfers, but not this late in the season. And now we have nothing to fall back on. We have no excuses at this point.
Well, no excuses. I think we tried with a guy like Asmus, who's he's just not consistent enough, man. He just isn't. He just is not consistent enough.
I mean, that's a little unfair because he was probably our best player through the first 15 games of the season.
He's not, but he was good. He wasn't great. He was good, and now he's completely falling apart. He's falling apart.
We had no offensive output for the first, maybe not 15, but probably 8 to 10 games of the season outside of what Max Asmus was giving us. So I kind of felt like, okay, he's doing a lot right now, but I know that he can't be our guy. We're not Oral Roberts, he can't be our guy if we want to make a tournament run, if we want to win the Big 12 tournament. Other guys have to step up and not necessarily supplant him, but support him. And Dessou is our best player. So we knew at the end of the day, once he returned to full health, that we would be going through him. He would be our offensive engine. But Hunter has been incredibly inconsistent as well. He's had spurts where he's looked really good, and that streakiness that and I know you just lost me on camera there, but inconsistency is across the board, right?
Hunter is not an efficient. Neither of the guards are efficient scorers, and you need that in college basketball. You don't need them. You don't need a world beater. If we had a world beater, it'd probably be Dessou, and I'm comfortable with that. Mitchell's a really good defensive stalwart. He's a good athlete. I like that a lot too. Other guys give fine minutes. I think there's so many transfers on the team now. There's no development of players, and that's not necessarily a great hill to die on. We were talking about the Tar Heels. They have guys and Duke, and and we'll get into more college. We'll see how this Kansas game goes, and we'll do a recap after. But we had so many transfers come in, and just not all of them are hitting, and that's just kind of been an issue. It's too reliant on the transfer portal almost.
Yeah, but we better stay focused, continue winning some games. I get worried that Trey Johnson might start to look elsewhere in the same way that Ron Holland had initially committed to us and then ends up going to the G League. And Trey Johnson is the type of recruit where, he's a program changing recruit for any school that's going after him. And obviously he's committed to the Texas Longhorns right now.
He might be a better recruit than Holland.
He might be. Yeah. He'll definitely he'll definitely have the ball in his hands more. He'll be
Golly, I lost you again.
Lose the listeners too.
All right. Well, we'll do more college hoops after the Kansas game. Fisher DeSopoulos, good to have everyone back on the Horns Up Talking Texas show. We'll get Quan and Nick in the fold next time. Hook 'em, baby.
Hook 'em.